Detective Mark Reynolds had been a police officer for more than 20 years. He had seen many strange situations, some terrifying, some confusing, but he thought he had experienced almost everything the job could throw at him. Yet that morning, when he walked into the precinct, he felt a small tingle of curiosity mixed with unease. It was a sunny autumn day, and the streets were unusually quiet. The call that came over the radio did not seem urgent at first, but as he listened, he realized it was more complicated than a simple theft. The dispatch voice reported a small robbery at a local jewelry store in the downtown area. A man had stolen some pieces of jewelry and fled, leaving the store clerk shaken but unharmed. Mark grabbed his coat and radioed back that he was on the way. Beside him, Rex, his German Shepherd canine partner, barked once as if sensing the tension in the air. Rex was more than a dog. He had trained with Mark for years. He could detect drugs, explosives, and even subtle signs of fear or danger in people. Mark trusted Rex's instincts more than anything else in the world. As Mark and Rex drove to the jewelry store, he thought about the details he knew. The suspect had fled on foot, and no weapon had been seen. The clerk described the man as nervous and hurried, but there was nothing particularly threatening about him. Still, the unusual part was that the suspect had avoided the cameras, and there was a sense that he might come back. Mark had learned long ago never to underestimate someone desperate enough to commit a crime. Even if it seemed small when they arrived, the store's door was slightly open, and the clerk, a young woman named Sarah, rushed out to greet Mark. She was clearly still trembling from the experience, her hand shaking slightly as she pointed toward the back of the store. "He ran that way," she said. "I didn't get a good look at his face." Mark nodded and reassured her that everything would be fine. He instructed Rex to stay close while he scanned the area. The dog sniffed the ground carefully, tail moving in short, controlled wags. Rex's ears twitched at every small sound, alert to the faintest signal of danger. While Mark examined the scene, a woman entered the store quietly. She walked calmly toward the display case, her movements smooth and deliberate. She wore a light blue blouse and dark jeans, and around her neck hung a small silver cross necklace. Mark noticed Rex immediately stiffen. The dog growled low in his throat and barked sharply. Mark froze for a moment. He had never seen Rex react like this to a regular customer. Normally, Rex only barked at people he sensed as threats or who had something to hide. The woman stopped and looked at Rex, her eyes wide but calm. She did not panic, and she did not raise her voice. Instead, she smiled faintly and took a careful step backward. "I don't want any trouble," she said softly. Mark felt a strange mix of curiosity and confusion. He had trained Rex to respond to real threats, and this reaction seemed unusual, almost personal. He watched as the dog circled the woman, barking sharply, then backing off slightly, never taking his eyes off her. "Rex, stay," Mark commanded, trying to maintain control. Rex obeyed for a moment but continued to growl quietly, a low warning that something was not right. Mark approached the woman carefully, hands raised slightly in a non-threatening manner. "I'm Detective Reynolds. This is my partner Rex. Can I help you?" he asked. The woman looked at him and nodded slowly. "My name is Emily Carter," she said. "I came to check on the store. I come here often." Her voice was steady, but there was a hint of nervousness in her eyes. Mark studied her for a moment. She seemed genuine, not trying to hide anything, but Rex's behavior was impossible to ignore. The dog had been trained to detect fear, anxiety, and danger. Mark had seen Rex respond to situations before, but this was different. It was almost as if Rex knew something about Emily that Mark could not see. He felt a shiver run down his spine as he considered the possibility that Rex's reaction might be more than instinct. It could be a warning, Rex hasn't barked at anyone like this before, Mark said quietly, more to himself than to Emily. Are you sure you haven't been involved in anything unusual recently? Emily shook her head. Nothing at all. I've just come to pick up a gift for a friend, she said calmly. She extended her hand toward the counter, but Rex barked again, more sharply this time, his hackles raised. The sound echoed in the small store, drawing the attention of the clerk and a few curious passers-by. Mark realized that he needed to investigate further. He didn't want to accuse anyone falsely, but he also couldn't ignore Rex's reaction. He asked Emily if she would step outside for a moment. As she moved toward the door, Rex lunged slightly, barking aggressively, but then stopped when Mark called his name. Emily's calm demeanor never changed. She walked past the dog slowly, keeping her hands visible, showing no sign of fear. It was this calmness that made Mark pause. Most people would have been terrified by a barking, growling German shepherd, but Emily remained composed. Outside the store, Mark decided to ask her a few more questions. Emily, I need to know if there is anything you might have seen or experienced that could explain Rex's behavior, he said gently. Emily thought for a moment, then nodded. I volunteer at a local shelter for children who are in danger or at risk. I've encountered some difficult situations there. Maybe Rex senses the tension or fear I've experienced, she said quietly. Mark considered this. It made sense that a dog trained to sense fear could react to lingering emotions or stressed out. Mark decided to take a cautious approach. He would observe her behavior more closely and see if Rex's reaction continued in different situations. The store clerk and a few witnesses watched quietly, intrigued by the unusual scene. Emily's calmness contrasted sharply with Rex's agitation, creating a tension in the air that was almost palpable. Mark realized that this was not a normal day, and he would need to be careful about how he proceeded. He also thought about the theft. Perhaps Rex's reaction was unrelated to the robbery, but it could also be connected in a way that was not immediately obvious. Dogs like Rex often detected things that humans could not, from subtle changes in body language to smells that lingered in the air. Mark had learned to trust Rex's instincts, even when they seemed strange or unexplained. He felt a mix of awe and anxiety as he prepared to continue the investigation. Emily noticed Mark's concern and spoke gently. I understand Rex is reacting strongly. I promise I'm not a threat, she said. Her voice had a calming effect, even as Rex continued to growl and bark. Mark appreciated her honesty and calmness. It was rare to see someone remain so composed under pressure, especially when a highly trained police dog was acting aggressively around them. He made a mental note that Emily's demeanor could be important in understanding the dog's behavior and the larger situation unfolding around the robbery. As Mark led Emily to a nearby bench outside the store, he realized that the day was far from over. The robbery, the dog's unusual reaction, and Emily's calm presence all combined into a situation that would require patience, observation, and careful judgment. He knew that by the end of this day, something remarkable would happen, something that would test both human courage and the extraordinary instincts of a loyal dog. Mark Reynolds sat on the bench outside the jewelry store with Emily Carter, still trying to process what had just happened. Rex, the German shepherd, paced nearby, his ears perked and eyes never leaving Emily. It was unusual behavior for a dog he trusted more than anyone else in the world. Mark had worked with Rex through dangerous arrests, drug raids, and even bomb threats. The dog had never behaved like this around someone calm, polite, and clearly harmless. Emily's presence had triggered something in Rex, something that Mark couldn't yet explain. Emily adjusted the silver cross necklace around her neck and looked at Mark with a quiet seriousness. I think Rex senses more than danger, she said softly. I volunteer at a local shelter for children who are at risk. Sometimes there are people who mean harm to the kids. Maybe he can sense my concern or the tension I carry from that work." Mark nodded slowly, trying to understand. He had seen dogs sense fear before, but Rex's reaction was different. It wasn't just sensing fear. It was almost like he knew there was a story behind Emily's calm demeanor. A story that needed to be heard. As Mark considered her words, Sarah, the store clerk, approached them cautiously. Detective, the guy who stole the jewelry. He didn't take much, just a few bracelets and rings. But he was quick, and something about him felt strange. He looked scared, but he looked like he knew what he was doing, she said, glancing nervously at Rex. The dog barked again, a sharp warning sound that made Sarah step back slightly. Mark tried to calm her and Rex at the same time. "Rex, easy. Good boy," he said. But Rex's reaction did not lessen. He stayed tense, circling Emily in short, alert movements. Mark decided he needed to understand both the robbery and Rex's unusual behavior. He asked Emily if she could come with him to the precinct for a short interview. Emily agreed without hesitation. "I want to help," she said simply. Mark was impressed by her willingness to cooperate, even with the strange behavior of his dog. He had worked with many witnesses who were scared or hesitant, but Emily seemed calm and steady, almost fearless. On the drive to the precinct, Rex stayed alert, glancing at Emily every few seconds. Mark tried to keep the conversation light, asking about her work at the shelter. Emily spoke softly but passionately about the children she helped. She described the challenges, the dangers, and the times when she had to be very careful to protect the kids. "Sometimes people get angry or scared when they don't understand what we're doing," she said. Mark could see why Rex might be reacting to her. The dog could sense danger in the past as well as the present, and perhaps he recognized the stress and vigilance in Emily's demeanor. At the precinct, they entered a quiet room. Mark had Rex sit near the door, keeping a watchful eye on the dog. Emily sat calmly, folding her hands in her lap. "I know Rex is unusual," Mark said, breaking the silence. "I've never seen him act this way. I need to understand why he's reacting to you." Emily nodded. "I don't know exactly. I've never had a dog react like this before. But maybe he senses something I've carried with me: fear, caution, responsibility. I've had to deal with dangerous situations at the shelter, and maybe he feels that." Mark asked her to describe the most recent incidents at the shelter. Emily explained that there was a man who had been causing trouble for the children. He had threatened them, tried to manipulate situations, and made several adults uncomfortable with his behavior. She had reported him once, but the man had avoided serious consequences. Emily had been cautious because she wanted to protect the children without causing panic. As she spoke, Mark noticed Rex's behavior became even more alert. The dog's growl was low and steady, focused entirely on Emily, as if trying to confirm her story. Mark began to see the connection. Rex wasn't acting aggressively because of Emily. He was reacting to the tension and danger she had faced. Dogs like Rex could detect emotions, intentions, and even past trauma. It seemed Rex was confirming that Emily's account was genuine, that she had experienced real danger. Mark felt a mixture of awe and responsibility. He had to handle this carefully, because Rex's instincts could be a crucial part of understanding the situation. Emily explained in more detail about the man at the shelter. "He tried to get close to the kids, and when I intervened, he became threatening. I didn't want to make things worse, so I reported the incidents carefully. I wanted the authorities to handle it, but I had to make sure the children were safe first." Mark realized that Emily's careful actions and courage might have prevented serious harm. He asked her if she had any proof, like notes, reports, or witnesses who could confirm her story. Emily nodded and handed him a folder with detailed records, observations, and notes from the shelter staff. Mark glanced through the documents. impressed by the thoroughness and dedication as they reviewed the materials. Rex remained alert, occasionally glancing at Emily and then at the folder. It was as if he recognized the truth of her words. Mark felt a growing sense of urgency. The man Emily described was dangerous, and the dog's behavior suggested that there might be an immediate threat. He decided that further investigation was needed, both for the robbery and for the safety of the children Emily protected. He called in a few trusted colleagues to start background checks and surveillance on the man in question. While waiting for the results, Mark asked Emily more about her life. She spoke humbly about her work, her family, and her dedication to helping others. She had a quiet strength that was rare, a kind of calmness that made people trust her immediately. Mark realized that Emily's courage was matched by her empathy, and that combination was likely what had drawn Rex's attention so strongly. Dogs could sense authenticity, and Rex clearly understood that Emily's story was truthful. Hours passed, and the investigation progressed. The background checks confirmed that the man at the shelter had a history of minor offenses and troubling behavior. Mark knew they were getting closer to understanding why Rex had reacted so strongly. He also recognized that Emily's calmness and courage had been critical. Without her careful actions, the children could have been in serious danger. Rex's instincts had simply amplified what was already true. Emily was someone who had faced danger and handled it with grace and intelligence. By the end of the day, Mark had a clearer picture of the events. The robbery was a separate incident, but Emily's presence had highlighted a larger story, one of courage, vigilance, and the unusual bond between a dog and a human who truly cared for others. Rex had remained alert, his behavior confirming Emily's words without a single lie. Mark felt a mixture of admiration and respect for both Emily and Rex. This was not a simple case of theft. It was a story of integrity, bravery, and instincts working together in an extraordinary way. Mark knew that the next steps would involve preparing Emily to testify if necessary, continuing the investigation into the man at the shelter, and using Rex's behavior to help confirm the truth. The day had started as a routine robbery call, but it had turned into something remarkable. Something that would leave a lasting impression on Mark, Rex, and everyone involved. Emily had shown courage and honesty, and Rex had demonstrated instincts that went beyond ordinary training. Together, they had formed an unspoken alliance that could reveal the truth and protect the vulnerable as the sun began to set. Casting warm light through the precinct windows, Mark felt a sense of purpose. This was why he had become a detective, to uncover truth, protect the innocent, and rely on both human and animal instincts to guide him. He looked at Emily, sitting calmly with a quiet determination in her eyes, and Rex, sitting obediently but alert, and realized that the events of this day were only the beginning. Something bigger was unfolding, and he would be ready to see it through. The days following the initial incident passed slowly, with Detective Mark Reynolds and Rex working quietly behind the scenes to piece together the puzzle. Emily Carter returned to her routine at the shelter, always careful, always alert, yet never showing fear. Her calmness impressed Mark, and he couldn't help but think that the woman's courage and composure were extraordinary. Meanwhile, Rex seemed unusually sensitive, constantly alert and scanning the environment whenever Emily was near. Mark realized that the dog was not merely responding to her presence. He was reacting to something deeper, something that had yet to reveal itself. Mark spent hours reviewing the files Emily had provided. They included notes on minor threats, suspicious visitors, and incidents that had made the children uneasy. There were reports of a man who had repeatedly appeared near the shelter, asking questions and trying to gather information about the staff and children. He had no criminal record that seemed significant, but the consistency of his behavior suggested a hidden agenda. Mark frowned as he read through the documents. realizing that Emily had managed to protect the children from a potentially dangerous situation without drawing attention. Her intelligence and strategy were impressive, but the situation was far from resolved. One afternoon, Mark received a call from the precinct. Surveillance had caught sight of the man Emily had described. He had been loitering near the shelter again, taking notes and watching carefully. Mark knew that the next step had to be precise. He called Emily and asked her to accompany him to the precinct once more. She agreed without hesitation, trusting Mark and his team to handle the situation. As she entered the car, Rex jumped up in excitement but stayed close to her, growling softly. Mark glanced at the dog and shook his head with a mixture of amazement and worry. The connection between Emily and Rex seemed almost unexplainable. At the precinct, Mark explained the surveillance to Emily. "We have him on camera," he said, pointing at a small monitor. "He's been following the same pattern you described. This confirms your story, Emily, but it also shows that he may pose an immediate risk to the shelter." Emily nodded solemnly. "I always knew he would come back. That's why I stayed vigilant. I couldn't let the children be in danger." Her voice was calm, but there was a hint of tension that Mark noticed. Rex growled low in agreement, his instincts confirming that Emily was telling the truth. Mark decided it was time to confront the man. He and two colleagues planned to approach him carefully, using surveillance data to predict his movements. Emily offered to accompany them, though she insisted on staying safe and maintaining her calm composure. Rex would also be present, his senses alert to any sudden danger. As they prepared, Mark briefed everyone on the situation. The man was clever, cautious, and persistent. They needed to handle this carefully to avoid alerting him or putting anyone in harm's way. The team moved quietly through the streets, following the man from a distance. Emily's presence seemed to influence Rex even from a few feet away. The dog remained focused, occasionally looking back at her, as if seeking confirmation that she was safe. Mark marveled at the bond between them. He had seen many dogs in his career, but none reacted with such intensity and understanding. It was as though Rex could sense the history of Emily's interactions with danger, the subtle tension she carried, and the protective instinct she had for the children at the shelter. Finally, the man stopped near a small park adjacent to the shelter. He seemed unaware of the team observing him from a distance. Emily remained calm, her eyes scanning the environment, while Rex growled softly, maintaining a tense posture. Mark gave a quiet signal to the officers, who prepared to approach. Just as they began to move, the man suddenly turned, his gaze sweeping the area. He paused when he saw Emily walking calmly, flanked by Mark and Rex. For a brief moment, his expression changed confusion, surprise, and perhaps recognition. He hesitated, as though trying to assess whether Emily posed a threat. Rex barked sharply, breaking the silence. The sound was precise, commanding, and full of authority. The man flinched, as if realizing that he had underestimated the situation. Mark stepped forward cautiously. "We need to talk," he said firmly. The man's body stiffened, and he raised his hand slightly. Emily remained calm, speaking softly but clearly. "You've been causing trouble for the children at the shelter. It's time to explain yourself." Her voice was steady, with no anger or fear, yet it carried weight. Rex growled in agreement, reinforcing the seriousness of her words. The man tried to speak, but his voice faltered. Emily continued, detailing the incidents she had documented. She described the threats, the manipulations, and the repeated attempts to gain information about the children. Each word seemed to carry authority and truth, and Rex's behavior confirmed it. The dog circled the man, sniffing cautiously, growling low but controlled. It was as if the combination of Emily's calm confidence and Rex's instincts left no room for lies or deceit. Mark could see that the man was beginning to realize he was trapped, not physically, But by the undeniable evidence and the presence of Emily and Rex, he had tried to manipulate situations in the past. But now, confronted with the truth, he faltered. Emily remained composed, maintaining a balance of empathy and firmness. She explained that while she wanted to protect the children, she also believed in giving people a chance to explain themselves, but only if they were truthful. Rex's behavior seemed to mirror her judgment, responding to honesty and rejecting deceit. Finally, the man broke down. He admitted to following the children and observing the shelter. He claimed he did not mean harm, but his actions suggested otherwise. Emily's calm demeanor never wavered as she guided the conversation, allowing him to speak while maintaining control. Mark noted that Rex had stopped growling, sitting obediently by Emily's side. The dog seemed to understand that the threat had been neutralized, that the truth had been spoken, and that Emily's courage had made all the difference. Mark and the officers escorted the man back to the precinct. Emily followed calmly, and Rex walked beside her, alert but no longer aggressive. The bond between them had guided the entire encounter, demonstrating an extraordinary partnership. Mark realized that Emily's strength was not just in her words or her courage, but in the quiet way she commanded respect and trust, even from a highly trained police dog. Rex's instincts had validated her honesty, creating an unspoken alliance that neither human nor animal could break. At the precinct, the man was formally questioned and placed under observation. Emily provided her statements and documentation, confirming the incidents at the shelter. Rex stayed nearby, observing quietly, but the tension in his posture had lessened. Mark could see that the dog's judgment had been precise, responding only to the truth of the situation. Emily's calmness, combined with Rex's instincts, had revealed the hidden threat and protected the children from potential harm. By the end of the day, Mark felt a deep sense of respect and admiration for Emily. Her courage, intelligence, and calm demeanor had been instrumental in uncovering the truth. Rex had played a critical role as well, his behavior confirming that Emily's story was genuine. Mark knew that few people would ever experience such a combination of human bravery and animal instinct. Together, Emily and Rex had navigated a complex and potentially dangerous situation, achieving a resolution that was both just and safe. The events of that day marked a turning point in the investigation. The man's true intentions had been revealed, thanks to Emily's careful documentation and calm courage. Rex's extraordinary behavior had reinforced the truth, making it undeniable. Mark understood that the partnership between Emily and Rex was rare, a combination of intuition, courage, and trust that transcended ordinary experiences. This moment would not only resolve the immediate threat, but also set the stage for the events that would follow, leaving a lasting impression on everyone involved. Weeks passed after the confrontation in the park, but the tension from that day still lingered in Detective Mark Reynolds' mind. The man who'd been following the children at the shelter was now in custody, awaiting trial. Mark knew that the next step would be crucial, ensuring that Emily Carter's testimony would be heard clearly and that the truth she had so carefully documented would lead to justice. He also knew that Rex, the German Shepherd, had an unusual role to play. The dog had been calm, alert, and precise in his instincts, reacting only to real threats. Now, Mark wanted to see if that instinct could help validate Emily's story in court. The courtroom was quiet, filled with the low hum of anticipation. Emily entered calmly, holding her folder of notes and documentation. She wore the same silver cross necklace that had first caught Rex's attention weeks before. Mark noticed the subtle tension in the air as Rex, seated beside him, stiffened slightly. He growled softly, just enough to draw attention. The people in the courtroom turned, curious about the dog's unusual behavior. Mark explained quietly to the officers and staff that Rex's reaction was nothing to fear. He was responding to Emily's presence in a way that indicated truth and integrity. When the trial began, the judge called the room to order. The man who had been causing trouble at the shelter sat at the defendant's table, trying to appear calm but visibly uneasy. He glanced toward Emily and Rex, noting the dog's sharp focus. Emily's voice was steady as she began to testify, describing the incidents at the shelter. She spoke slowly and clearly, recounting the threats, the suspicious visits, and the moments when the man had attempted to manipulate the children. Each word she spoke was precise, factual, and supported by her detailed notes. Rex, sitting alert beside the officer, barked once sharply as Emily mentioned a particularly tense encounter with the man. The sound echoed in the courtroom, and everyone turned to look. The judge raised an eyebrow, and the jury leaned forward, intrigued. Mark could see that Rex's behavior was making an impact, reinforcing Emily's words in a way that was almost tangible. The dog did not bark at random. He reacted only to the moments of truth, confirming that Emily's testimony was accurate and genuine. As Emily continued, she explained how she had taken careful steps to protect the children while still documenting the man's behavior. She described the reports she had submitted, the observations she had made, and the ways in which she had tried to keep the children safe. The jury listened intently, clearly impressed by her thoroughness and courage. Rex's ears twitched at every word, and he remained focused on Emily, occasionally glancing at the defendant. The man shifted uneasily in his seat, realizing that the dog's reactions were reinforcing the story in front of him. The prosecutor asked Emily to describe her interactions with the man in detail. She spoke of his repeated attempts to gain information about the children, his manipulative behavior, and the subtle threats he had made. She remained calm throughout, her composure unwavering, even as she recounted moments that would have made anyone else nervous or fearful. Rex barked again, low and controlled, as Emily described a particularly threatening encounter. The sound was precise, almost as if the dog were emphasizing the truth in her words. The courtroom was silent, captivated by the unusual demonstration of instinct and honesty. Mark noticed that the man's attempts to appear confident were faltering. Each time Emily spoke, and Rex reacted, he became more nervous. It was clear that the dog's instincts were validating the testimony. Mark realized that few people could claim such an extraordinary partnership between human and animal in a courtroom setting. Emily's calm courage and Rex's precise instincts created a combination that left no room for doubt. The jury and the judge were witnessing something remarkable: truth, reinforced not only by words and evidence, but by the behavior of a highly trained and loyal dog. Emily went on to explain her motivations. She spoke of her dedication to the children, her desire to protect them, and her belief in justice. She explained that she had not sought recognition or reward, but had acted out of responsibility and concern for the vulnerable. Her words were simple yet powerful, and they resonated deeply with everyone in the courtroom. Rex's continued attention, his occasional bark, and his unwavering focus on Emily seemed to punctuate her words, reinforcing the sincerity of her statements. The defense tried to question her credibility, suggesting that she may have misunderstood the man's intentions. Emily remained calm, answering every question honestly and with clarity. She provided documentation, reports, and witness accounts that supported her story. Rex, sitting alert beside the officer, reacted slightly whenever Emily spoke truthfully, his behavior almost like a silent confirmation of her honesty. The courtroom began to sense the power of this unusual partnership. People whispered quietly among themselves, noting how a dog could play such a pivotal role in reinforcing the credibility of a witness. As the trial continued, Mark felt a mix of pride and awe. Emily's calm courage had been remarkable from the beginning, and now it was having an extraordinary impact. The dog's instincts, which had initially seemed mysterious and puzzling, were proving to be an undeniable force in the courtroom. Each bark, each alert movement, reinforced the truth and kept the focus on Emily's words. The combination of her documentation, her testimony, and Rex's instinct created a compelling story that no one could ignore. Finally, Emily concluded her testimony. She looked calmly at the jury and judge, knowing that she had spoken the truth and that the evidence supported her account. Rex sat obediently beside her, his posture relaxed but attentive. The courtroom was silent for a moment, absorbing the weight of what had just been presented. The judge, who had seen many cases in his career, nodded slightly, acknowledging the strength and credibility of Emily's testimony. The jury members whispered quietly, clearly affected by the unusual and compelling evidence. Mark knew that the trial was nearing a turning point. The prosecutor would now use Emily's testimony, supported by Rex's behavior, to emphasize the truth and demonstrate that the man's actions had been real and threatening. The unusual presence of Rex, responding with instinctive precision, had made an impression that words alone could not achieve. Mark felt a deep sense of respect for both Emily and Rex. Together, they had created a combination of courage, truth, an instinct that was truly extraordinary. As the courtroom proceedings continued, it became clear that Emily's testimony had shifted the mood. The man who had caused fear and uncertainty was now on the defensive. Rex's presence served as a constant reminder that the truth could not be hidden and that actions had consequences. Emily remained composed, her calm demeanor unshaken by the unusual attention or the dog's behavior. Mark observed silently, realizing that few moments in his career had been as remarkable as this. The bond between Emily and Rex had created an undeniable force in the courtroom, one that could not be ignored or dismissed. By the end of the day, the courtroom had witnessed something extraordinary. Emily's courage, her careful documentation, and Rex's instincts had combined to create a story that was undeniable, compelling, and deeply moving. The judge, the jury, and the spectators had all seen the power of truth reinforced by instinct and integrity. Mark felt a profound sense of satisfaction, knowing that Emily's actions and Rex's reactions had protected the children, revealed the truth, and demonstrated an extraordinary partnership that would be remembered for years to come. The courtroom was quiet as the final arguments concluded. Detective Mark Reynolds sat with Rex at his side, watching the proceedings closely. Emily Carter remained composed, her silver cross necklace catching the soft sunlight that filtered through the high windows. Her calmness was striking, especially considering the weight of the situation. The man who had been causing trouble at the shelter sat nervously at the defendant's table, fidgeting and avoiding eye contact. For the first time, it was clear that he understood the seriousness of the case and the courage of the woman standing before him. The prosecutor spoke passionately about the threats the man had posed to the children, emphasizing Emily's careful documentation and responsible actions. Every time the prosecutor referenced the truth of Emily's story, Rex reacted subtly, a soft bark, a shift in stance, an alert glance toward Emily. It was almost as if the dog was silently reinforcing the truth to everyone in the room. The jurors watched intently, and even the judge seemed captivated by the unusual partnership between Emily and Rex. Mark could see that the combination of courage, evidence, and instinct had created a compelling argument that could not be ignored. When it was time for Emily to make her final statement, she stood calmly and addressed the court. She spoke not just of the events themselves, but of the importance of protecting the vulnerable and acting with integrity. Her voice was steady and clear. She explained that her goal had never been recognition or personal gain, but simply to ensure the safety of the children at the shelter. She described how she had taken careful steps, documented everything, and sought help when necessary. Her words were simple but powerful, leaving a deep impression on the jurors and everyone present. Rex, sitting obediently at Mark's side, barked once sharply as Emily emphasized the moments of danger she had faced. The bark was precise, confident, and commanding. It was as if the dog were confirming the truth of every word Emily had spoken. The courtroom was silent, the sound leaving a strong impression on everyone. The jurors whispered quietly among themselves, exchanging glances that reflected awe and respect. The defendant, on the other hand, appeared increasingly anxious. His attempt to remain calm, failing under the weight of undeniable truth and instinctual confirmation. The judge called for order and reminded the jury to consider all evidence carefully. Emily returned to her seat quietly, maintaining her calm demeanor. Mark felt a sense of pride and relief. Emily's bravery and honesty had been unwavering, and Rex's instincts had amplified the impact of her testimony. Together, they had created a situation that was impossible to ignore. The courtroom had witnessed an extraordinary demonstration of courage, truth, and loyalty, human and animal working together in perfect harmony to reveal justice thought as the jury deliberated. Mark reflected on the events of the past weeks. The robbery at the jewelry store had seemed like the start of an ordinary case, but it had led to the uncovering of a much more serious situation. Emily's careful attention, calm courage, and dedication to the children had been crucial. Rex's behavior had validated her actions in a way that words alone could not. Mark realized that few people ever experience such a partnership, where instinct, courage, and truth combined so powerfully. He felt fortunate to witness it firsthand. When the jury returned, the tension in the courtroom was palpable. The foreperson stood and announced the verdict: guilty. The courtroom reacted immediately. The man had been held accountable for his actions, largely due to Emily's bravery and Rex's extraordinary instincts. Relief and satisfaction filled the room, particularly among those who had supported Emily throughout the investigation. She remained composed, her calm demeanor never wavering, yet her eyes reflected a quiet triumph. Rex sat obediently by Mark's side, his tail giving a small, content wag after the verdict. Emily stepped outside the courtroom with Mark and Rex. The sun was warm, casting a soft glow over the street. Passersby recognized Emily and stopped to congratulate her, many expressing amazement at how a woman and a dog had uncovered the truth and protected children from harm. Emily smiled humbly, explaining that she had only done what was right. Rex, ever alert, sniffed the air, cautiously but relaxed as he sensed the calm and safety surrounding them. The local media covered the story the next day, highlighting Emily's bravery and the extraordinary role Rex had played. Photos showed Emily standing confidently with Rex at her side, and the story quickly spread throughout the community. People admired her courage, dedication, and composure. The image of the German Shepherd barking once in the courtroom, confirming the truth without words, became symbolic of loyalty, instinct, and justice. Emily's actions inspired others to act with integrity and to protect those who could not protect themselves. Mark continued to work with Emily and Rex in the weeks that followed, ensuring the safety of the shelter and monitoring any potential threats. Emily remained humble, continuing her work quietly and responsibly. She expressed that the recognition was not important. What mattered most was that the children were safe. Mark could see that her courage and calmness were natural traits, deeply rooted in her character. Rex continued to be attentive, showing that the dog's instincts remained sharp and reliable. Together, they had formed an extraordinary team that combined human bravery with animal intuition. Reflecting on the events, Mark realized that this case had been remarkable in many ways. It was not just about justice or accountability. It was about the power of truth, courage, and instinct working together. Emily's dedication to protecting others, her calmness under pressure, and Rex's precise reactions had revealed a situation that might have gone unnoticed otherwise. The partnership between human and animal had been extraordinary. demonstrating that courage and loyalty could transcend ordinary boundaries and create an impact that touched everyone involved. The experience left a lasting impression on Mark, Emily, and the community. People often spoke of the courage of the woman who had faced danger quietly and the dog whose instincts validated her words. Emily's calm demeanor, careful documentation, and dedication to the truth had been remarkable, and Rex's behavior had made her story undeniable. The children at the shelter were safe, and the man who had caused so much worry had been held accountable. The combination of human courage and animal instinct had achieved justice in a way that was both extraordinary and unforgettable. In the months that followed, Emily returned to her work at the shelter with renewed confidence. She remained vigilant, aware of the challenges, but prepared to face them calmly and responsibly. Rex continued to accompany Mark on cases, occasionally visiting the shelter and reinforcing the bond he had formed with Emily. Their story became a symbol of bravery, integrity, and the incredible ways that humans and animals could work together to protect others and reveal the truth. Mark often reflected on that day in the courtroom, recalling the moment when Rex barked sharply and the room fell silent. It had been a turning point, a moment when instinct, courage, and truth converged to create justice. Emily's calm confidence, meticulous documentation, and genuine concern for others had made her extraordinary. Rex's behavior had amplified the impact, confirming her words in a way that left no doubt. Together, they had changed the outcome of a case, protected children, and inspired a community. Even years later, Mark would remember Emily and Rex as an example of courage, dedication, and trust. The story of the dog barking at the woman with the cross necklace and the courtroom silence that followed became a legend in the local police force. Emily continued to quietly protect the vulnerable, and Rex remained an exceptional partner, his instincts unmatched. The bond they had formed and the justice they achieved would be remembered as a remarkable example of bravery, truth, and the extraordinary connections between humans and animals.